Kirk very generously offered to share some of his strategy shifts. Perhaps you would tell us that story.
I'm a veteran software engineer. I actually started with Fortran on punch cards back in 1969. I went back to college in my early 30s and finished my bachelor's in electrical engineering at age 35. And I've had a number of different jobs, mostly contract, with one full-time position the first 5 years. I've averaged one new job a year ever since then. I've been doing a job search for 4 or 5 months now, and I have the pattern that I always do well in the cultural interview, and I always don't do well in the technical testing interview. And I understand that's because I'm a little rusty. My last few contracts have not needed me to be as actively programming. So I'm not as good at that. So a couple of weeks ago, the thought occurred to me that maybe I want to take some time off from working as a developer and do something a little different. I have a long-term goal of creating a makerspace in a box truck. And I have the truck. It's a 24-foot box reefer. I used to work as a diesel truck mechanic. And so I know how to fix most of the things that can go wrong with it. And so I noticed in the local paper that they're looking for school bus drivers. So I've applied for that. And in another week or so, I may go ahead and pull the trigger and get that job, which would be 5 hours a day, perhaps more, but around 25, 30 hours a week. Local, the drive to the bus depot is 4 minutes. And this would give me the time to polish up my technical skills and get certified in Delphi. And they want me to agree to a year's contract with them because they will be putting me through the school to get my truck driver's license, which you need to be able to drive a big heavy vehicle with air brakes. So, but I still have one more job that's hanging fire. I interviewed with them a couple of weeks ago, and then a week ago last Friday, I had the cultural interview with 6 or 7 different guys, all firing questions at me. And I think I did pretty well, but I hadn't heard from them for a week. And so I figured they would chosen somebody else. On Facebook, I saw the guy who had given me the lead on LinkedIn posting the job again. And I said to him, well, it looks like since I haven't heard from you that you've chosen somebody else. Can you tell me what was wrong with my my qualifications or presentation? And he said, oh, we haven't made the choice yet. We have another interview Monday, which is today. And so suddenly that possibility is back on the back burner, or perhaps even the front burner. I don't know. But I want a job that I can do from home, because after moving around for all those other jobs, I found the most wonderful place to live I've ever seen. So
this is fantastic. You've touched on some really great things here. May I extract some threads from this?
Go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. So one of the first things that Kirk talked about here was recognizing where he's excelling in the job search and where there's a gap. And it takes introspection, courage, humility to do this. So knowing I'm excelling in the cultural interview, I'm not excelling in the technical interview, and therefore saying, okay, so I may need to hone those skills. Partly he got there through introspection and some brave self-examination. Partly, I imagine you got there through some debriefs. So ask for feedback. When you don't get the job, ask for feedback. Kirk also touched on the timeline disconnect here in the job search. I want a job. This is the most important thing to me. This is my top of mind, urgent priority. The pandemic has broken everyone's sense of time. I have caught myself, this was particularly true last year, I would have sent out a proposal and then I catch myself pounding out that email that says, further to my earlier proposal, and I realize, wow, I sent that proposal yesterday. Of course I haven't heard back. This is completely unreasonable. But for me, it's urgent. It's my top priority. For the client, for the interviewer, it may not be quite so urgent. So make sure that your senses of time are aligned. Ask, when will you be making a decision? How can I follow up with you? What's the next step? Find reasons to stay in touch. Connect on lots of different levels so that you're keeping a finger on the pulse. And have a backup plan. One of the things we talked about last week, and I dropped the handout from last week into the chat again in case people joined us a little later today, know your runway. As I shared last week, I work with clients who had a really great cushion but panicked and took a fast wrong job and are now back in the search with a blowout job on their resume. And I work with people who did not sit down and run their budget and figure out that they could not pay next month's rent. And they're sitting back, waiting for perfection to come along. And what they need to do is get themselves down to Target and fill in an application form this afternoon. Know your runway, know your budget, know your parameters, know your constraints. Sometimes those constraints are sort of negatives. I have to make at least this much money. I can't work those hours. I have caregiving responsibilities. Sometimes they are joyful, wonderful things. I love where I live. I like to dance and I can step out of my front door and do that every Friday night. That is a constraint on the type of job that you may want to take, but it is a joyful, positive threshold that you want to maintain.